Hi guys, it's Stacy and welcome to the Retro Time Machine. So today we are going to be working on a worm composting bin. So as you can see behind me, I have a beautiful massive greenhouse and plants need good food. I like good food also, but I don't always know what to do with my kitchen scraps, especially now that I live in a more urban area. So I started looking into worm composting, and it's a great way to reduce your food waste and come up with great fertilizer solutions for your plants. So we're going to go through that today together. So there are so many amazing reasons why you should have a worm compost pile. About a pound of worms can eat maybe about a quarter of a pound of food a day, depending on how hungry they are. Usually it's safe to say that they can eat their weight in food in about a week. That is a lot of table scraps if you really think about it. And it's not just your table, it could be your neighbors and you could share it with friends. But if you think about the process that fruits and vegetables have to go through just to get to your own door or your grocery store, it's kind of sad. You know, we're very judgmental people. We want our peaches to not have any spots and our bell peppers to be perfectly straight and bananas to have a certain curve. And it's unrealistic and to me very unappetizing. We wind up wasting about a third of the food that's produced, either for cosmetic reasons or just doesn't get consumed. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, grocery stores, oh, restaurants. No, 90% of food waste comes from people like you and me. You buy that mango that took that whole long journey to get there and it's perfect, it's the perfect specimen, and you bring it home and you just don't eat it and it goes bad. And you put it in the trash. And when you put food in the trash, it doesn't break down, it doesn't decompose. It's buried under layer after layer of plastic and garbage and all kinds of other gross stuff at a landfill. And it winds up leaching methane gas instead of breaking down back into the environment. Worms are amazing. They can turn and churn out compost so fast. So a traditional compost pile, you still need the same things, water, temperature, green and brown ingredients, but a traditional compost can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to break down your table scraps or lawn clippings or branches and twigs, where worms, they're fast and they're hungry. So for me, educating people about keeping worms and the benefits of worm fertilizer and how cute and unstinky they are is one of the big major reasons why I'm doing this video. It's really easy to do. You can find a local worm dealer, and I highly encourage you to try it. You know, it's a very small part that you can do at home, and if we all did it, it could actually change the world.
You're going to need an opaque container, some newspaper scraps, a little bit of cardboard, a drill with a 1/4 inch drill bit, and then some of this cocoa core, and some scissors probably to cut up your paper. You don't need a super deep container for worms, but you do want one that's sturdy. So I chose this one because it has wheels and it also has a lid that snaps together. That way I can have an easy time pulling it in and out and adding scraps and removing castings. First things first is you need adequate airflow, so I am just going through and adding air holes on every side, making sure not to go through any of the serious structural areas, but this way the worms can get a nice airflow and be happy and healthy.
Okay, so our next step is we are going to need some cocoa cure. So it is not the really furry part of a coconut, but the layers in between, and it decompresses down. And the cool thing about it is it's a really eco-friendly alternative to peat moss. Peat moss is used for aeration and water content, but it's not very sustainable and it's very hard to get, and we are really robbing our planet of peat reserves. So this cocoa cure is a great alternative. So it comes in this little brick, and we are going to rehydrate that. I'm using 5 pounds about of this, and we're going to mix it with water and let that expand. So what this is going to do is it's going to help hold moisture for the worms, because they like to have something like a wet sponge that they live in. And it's also going to add aeration because it's going to become really light and fluffy and squishy. So that's going to give them plenty of room to move around. And they'll also eat this. The thing about using it for planting is it doesn't really have a lot of nutrition, but it does have a lot of aeration and moisture content. So it's something that you could mix into your potting soil, or for things like orchids, or maybe even succulents that you only want to water never. So we are gonna go ahead and bust these puppies open and rehydrate them and get that started for our worm bedding. Just wanna give you a little close up on that brick. Isn't that cool? It's actually really heavy, but you can see all the little fibers and particles in there. So we're gonna use 2 of these, and I'm hoping that's enough. I found that they are cheaper at some nurseries than they are online, like on Amazon, and they're way more expensive at your local hardware store, like Home Depot and Lowe's. They're asking a ton of money for a product like this. So shop it out, but it is a necessary component for your worm bin. Make sure you dump out all of your microplastics and throw these away responsibly, because microplastics are really a big problem in the world. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and just set our bricks in. And I've got about a gallon of water in this vintage Tupperware pitcher, and we're gonna pour that in. I will probably need to fill this up again. While we wait for these bricks to expand, we're gonna go ahead and start cutting up our newspaper and cardboard. So for me, one of my favorite reasons that I've just realized while starting this worm bin is the connection it is bringing to me and my new neighbors. So we've only been here about 4 months, and we do know our next door neighbors, but I decided to join the Nextdoor app, and I reached out and said, hey, does anyone have any old cardboard or newspaper? And I told everyone about my worm project idea and how in a couple weeks I'll be able to be accepting food scraps. We'll cut off this part of broccoli or the tops of peppers, and I personally feel very guilty about throwing them away. I found a lot of ways to turn them into food, and with the broccoli stems, they really work well in a curry, but I know that a lot of people don't do that. So I reached out and I said, hey, anyone in the neighborhood have any extra paper? Because they need this brown material to help balance out the moisture, and they also break it down. And that is the fantastic part about worms, is they'll eat pretty much anything. You really don't want to add bread, meat, or dairy, or the feces of a carnivore. So like your cat and dog poop, not good. You could add very small amounts of like horse manure or an herbivore, but the whole point in my mind is to keep this not a stinky mess, and a lot of that breaks down very fast anyway on its own. You will find these red wiggler worms in that they are sometimes called manure worms because of the leftover nutrients of the digestive process of herbivores. But my neighbors brought over a big old bag of newspaper and mail. I'm personally staying away from any sort of cardboard or paper that has too much coloring or too much like shine, like a high shine box. So we're gonna cut this up into little strips and use that along with our cocoa cure once that has all absorbed the moisture, and mix it up. I'm gonna go ahead and start dumping that in. And I'm also going to add some leftover potting soil I have, and this is earth from my own ground. Now I live in a place where it's very sandy, and worms need grit for all of their stomachs to digest and process the ingredients that we're going to be adding into this. So I'm going to be adding some dirt from my yard, some potting soil which already has a good amount of nutrients. So we've got our newspaper inside. I'm just tossing that with the cocoa core that we have, making sure I'm scooping at the bottom because a lot of this is more moist than what would be at the top. Trying to make sure every piece of newspaper is coated in some kind of soil. I'm going to go ahead and add in our potting soil and local soil into our paper and coconut mix and start really bringing this to a fertilizer that will work for my home environment. So we are not putting any bottom drains on our worm compost bin. Moisture is your friend. It does help to keep away a lot of the pest bugs and insects. You don't ever want it to be too moist because worms breathe through their skin. So if it's too wet or too cold, their lungs don't really work. So finding a good balance is key. That's why you always have to go back and add paper. And in the summer months, you may need to water. It all depends, but you probably want to get a digital moisture meter. Oh, I would live in here. This looks amazing. All right, so tomorrow I'm gonna go pick up my wormies and we will add them to the bin. All right, so I went and picked up our worms in Dallas yesterday at the Texas Worm Ranch, and we're about to put them in their new home, but I wanted to show you guys how beautiful they are. So we've got a ton of gorgeous worms, and we are going to put them into their new home. We got our bin set up the other day, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of dig a little hole over here on this side of the worm bin, and we're going to introduce our worms, and then we'll give some food to them. Some of them did try to escape yesterday or last night in the enclosure that they were in. I got home pretty late, so I didn't want to have to mess with them in the middle of the night. I recommend trying to source worms from your local area if possible. They're going to be more accustomed to the climate that you live in and probably fare a little bit better than shipped worms. It may take a little bit of research or a little bit of a drive to come here to get them, but that's what I would recommend. Now that everybody is in their bin, we are going to go ahead and add some food scraps over here with them for this first feeding. And then we're going to alternate sides on which we feed, but since they're just getting used to their new home, we want to give them something to snack on. Then we're going to cover them up with some wet newspaper and cheesecloth so they don't try to escape through the little air holes that we drilled, because they will. Until they figure it out, this is where they live and they're comfortable and happy. Sometimes you'll find like a pile of them on the floor. So worms really don't like citrus, and they don't like a whole lot of onions and garlic. It's good to break it down into tinier pieces if you can, and alternate the sides on which you feed. So that way when you're collecting your castings, you just feed on the same side twice, but the worms will wiggle their way over and then wiggle their way back to the food. So I've got some fennel pieces and some kale. This is the stem of a cauliflower. Some wilted celery that I didn't eat quick enough. So the food is also going to add a lot of moisture content to your bin, so you don't really have to water your bin very often. It's going to absorb out of the food that you're putting in there. I'm also going to put in some coffee grounds and really break up some eggshells. So for this go round, I'm avoiding using some really dense veggie material. I'm gonna go ahead and just put that back in my refrigerator in a little baggie to save it for later. I wanna start them off with something that's a little bit easier to process for this first feeding and see how much they eat and how long. Then I can kind of gauge my feeding off of that. I'm gonna crush up some eggshells and just sprinkle those in there. And I've also got some coffee grounds mixed in with these eggshells from breakfast this morning. So I'm just going to go ahead and toss those in there as well. I'm going to drain off the excess liquid though. Now that we've got our worms in and we put the food on top, I'm going to go ahead and just bury them because they like to be in the dark and under the ground. And then I've just got a bucket of water here and a piece of non-bleached cheesecloth, which is going to act as a little barrier for them. And I've also got some newspaper, and that's just going to help to lock in the moisture. Now we're just going to get this newspaper wet, kind of wring it out and use that across the top. And then we're going to do the same thing with the cheesecloth. And I'm really going to tuck them in with this. I'm using it kind of as a netting. You could probably glue like little circles of wire screen around your air vents to keep out bugs and keep the worms in. And I will probably wind up doing that in the near future. But for now, they're just going to get tucked in with some cheesecloth. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this video about how to make a worm compost bin. I will try to post updates occasionally and show you guys the progress that we're making on the greenhouse behind and how these worms are helping me along with my gardening. Like always, take care and God bless.